Hello, and welcome to episode 31 of Kwanzu's ABM POV. Today, we're going to be discussing measuring success from your ABM advertising programs. With us, we have Mani Iyer, CEO of Kwanzu, and I'm Jeff Jewett. Hey, Mani, how you doing today?
Doing well, Jeff. Good to talk to you. I think we have a pretty interesting topic for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one that's been quite divisive in the industry, and one that have left a lot of people trying to figure it out. So, definitely excited to cover this topic with you. So our first question for today are, what are the key metrics for ABM advertising programs, and how are they different from more traditional display ads? And the reason that I wanted to cover this topic with you is again because more often than not, people go into ABM advertising expected to kind of be cookie cutter and fit into their existing dashboards, their existing metrics, and most importantly, their discussions with executives within their organizations in terms of how they should be measuring these programs. So with that, Mani, I'd love to cover this topic with you.
Yeah, no, I think what I thought we could do, Jeff, is let's bring up our regular whiteboard here, and what I wanted to do was just break it up into a discussion around a couple of things. One is if you look at display and spend on display media, display budgets. I'm going to label on the left, if you see the screen here, what I call traditional display. And so there's obviously, B2B companies have been spending a bunch of money on display advertising, paid media, traditional display advertising. So we will kind of see what has changed, what is different going from traditional display advertising to paid media. So first up on the left, a key thing to discuss is how are, in a traditional display model, how do you kind of reach your audience, right? So reaching your audience, what happens is there's a few standard tactics. I mean, people end up, of course, getting their ads placed or served on what I call premium websites, premium publishers, and do what's called direct buy display, where they're actually buying inventory on specific sites to get their ads served out and to get people to engage. Where they look at that as kind of the key watering holes where the audience they care about is present. Then you've got contextual targeting, which is where there's certain keywords that are relevant topics, content areas where they expect some engagement, and so there are specific topic keywords that drive where ads get placed and where you're trying to draw an audience. You then have, of course, you've got your search, where people are looking at search keywords on Google and then trying to see, can I retarget those visitors who search on specific topics, so that's search retargeting. You've got your more regular site retargeting, which is people visiting a website, you want to bring them back, but that certainly doesn't address the question of how do I bring in net new visitors, right, that I care about. So, and then if you have an existing email database, you've got ways to do what's called retargeting of those visitors who are already in the email database. So if you look at all these as the more traditional display tactics, here what's happening is you really are just getting to a broad audience at the top of funnel. They're certainly not as precise as the ones you want, right? And now if you look at metrics here, more traditional metrics are, okay, how many impressions or ads did I get? Was I able to show these people? How many clicks did I get? How many form fills did I get on my landing pages? And then you've got, of course, at the end of it all, a key metric people look at is cost per lead. How many form fills did I get? How many leads got created? So this is, Jeff, is a more traditional model. And as you know, ABM is quite different, right? Suddenly you're looking at accounts. So now if you draw the parallel for what the ABM model looks like, you start with a list of accounts, key target accounts. Now, there will be some data providers, vendors who are starting to talk about don't start with accounts first, but start with intent topics that people are interested in. Figure out your accounts from there. These are so-called in-market accounts, in-market buyers. Start there. But either way, you either have a thesis for a list of accounts or you construct your list of accounts. Then you kind of hone in further into your buyer personas within those accounts into folks with specific seniorities or job levels, folks in specific job functions. And then you can further filter it down if you want to narrow down if this pool is still large. If you want to do more precision into the targeting, you can apply other filters. As an example, you could do intent topic-based filters saying within these companies, within these organizations and these buyers, find me people who are currently in market looking for, computer security software or cloud collaboration software. And here's where I'm going to draw a line here real quick to talk about two key ways that this information is then split, and then you can have data, third-party data, that you can then source. One is online B2B cookie data, or you've got your business IP ranges that represent the companies that are browsing the web from these accounts, the employees from these accounts. So either way, you got either business IP ranges or online B2B cookies. And to contrast with the broad audience or the top of funnel you're reaching in the traditional model, what's probably worth noting is in this model, you are, I call it precision targeting, of your audience at the top of funnel, because it's much more precise in terms of the companies, the buyer personas, et cetera, et cetera. And then if I go further down, you'll see that I can now bring it back together, and then I can look at metrics. So metrics here is a little bit different. Yes, you care about impressions, but more important, you look at your clicks. And then the clicks are not just vanilla clicks. Those are clicks mapped into the accounts that you already have decided are of interest to you. So you look at where the accounts, as to where the clicks are coming from. Then you're going to next to look at where these clicks and even otherwise where the website visits are coming from on your site. And there are ways to actually tie it back to the audience you're targeting, like your cookies and business IPs. And you can, again, confirm website visits as being from the same accounts that you care about. And at the end of it all, you can start mapping out what we call engaged buyers. Buyers who are engaging with your ads and show that behavior with clicks. Buyers who visit your website. So you're going to essentially start mapping your buyers, individual engaged buyers, where we look at different IPs they're coming from or different cookies they're tied to. So you map them across both ad clicks and site visits. And so what does this mean? Well, basically, this means you are essentially, instead of your cost per lead metric, which is your other metric, you can now start thinking in terms of cost per engaged buyer. What is it costing you to bring in each engaged buyer? And the key point here is these include folks who have never visited your website before. That's important to note. So there you go. Essentially, it's a whole new way of thinking about advertising. It's much more precise, very targeted, and from a cost per lead, moving to a cost per engaged buyer model. Jeff?
Yeah, so the things that really stand out to me and what you've presented here is that, the first is that, a lot of people go into ABM because they think, that's the new kind of shiny object. That's where they need to be. But in reality, there's a lot of preparation that needs to go into it. And a lot of that is thinking about those accounts. And I think that one of the things you touched on that was really important is that, when you think about your list of accounts here, you're really thinking of who are the people that I know can buy from us. And now there's tons of vendors out there that can help you to do lookalike audiences, and there's also data vendors, as you mentioned, around intent topics. So that's specifically the people that are looking for your products. And so when you start to think about, I'm only targeting accounts and only targeting people on those accounts that either show an interest or look a lot like my customer and are highly likely to convert if I can get them into my funnel, you start to see that there's a lot more value in every single engagement within an ABM program versus traditional display. And I think that's relevant in that, we think about a cost per lead, but leads are often very low converting. When we think about a cost per engaged buyer, every single one of those becomes highly valuable to the organization, which actually kind of drives me to the next question. So that's, recognizing that one is this highly precise, this ABM advertising program is a highly precise engagement. That really is going to have a big impact on how do we make sure that we are measuring the right metrics and ensure that we having successful ABM advertising programs. And also, like, what are the best practices? How do we measure that ABM, that precision program versus that broad display program, and make sure that we're not overspending or underspending on those programs. Monty?
Yeah, I think I think we really are trying to drill down from where we left off the previous question here, Jeff. So let's kind of get into it again using our whiteboard. So here's what I would do is, now that we've got this mapped out, at least contrast at a high level, traditional versus ABM advertising type of display. Let me switch into first up. Let me kind of clear the screen here, and then let's look at how to think about this. So what I would do is the same thing like we did earlier. Just draw up a quick line here. And so the way to think about it is, let's say if you do traditional display, you have a display advertising budget of some amount, whatever you might be looking to spend. And the key outcome you're looking at is leads. You're looking at a cost per lead. And just to give a broad range, this might be anywhere from, say, $50, which you get super lucky. Display tends to be quite a bit more, but I'll just put a broad range here of $50 to $200, say, cost per lead. But as you mentioned, Jeff, the key point here to note is that a lead is not a lead in this model. You have your low value leads, which are not a fit. They don't represent your target accounts. They essentially end up being not useful at all for your salespeople to follow up with. So they don't fit your target account, target buyer personas, buyer profiles. They don't fit your target personas, or even people who your sales folks, SDRs, want to talk to. And then you have the high value. So the point is, you end up seeing quite a bit of waste. I mean, you're going to serve out these ads. You may not get to the people you care about, but the high value ones are the ones which is the right account. They engage with sales. They have all the characteristics you care about. And then this is the one that turns into a meeting, an API, and then, of course, finally a deal. So what does this mean? Well, the point here is on the left is you really, beyond thinking about this, you'll want to start thinking about, okay, what's happening? Based on the conversions that I'm seeing, finally to the close point deals, am I coming out ahead? Am I spending the money the way I should be spending? So you got to look at kind of final conversion data on these programs, display programs, and then you may still say, okay, you know what, it's worth it to me. Now let's look at, as a contrast, let's look at the ABM model. In the ABM model, of course, similar to your display ad budget, you're going to have an ABM advertising program budget. So that's one thing we always we tell our customers, that's how you want to think about the fact you're putting some money into a platform, some media to serve out the ads, some data that third-party data you might buy from the same vendor or buy on your own. But net, you spend this money, you're going to look at your engaged buyers. If you remember, we talked about engaged buyers earlier. And then you can divide the total budget by the total number of engaged buyers you get. And we already discussed engaged buyers, guys who are from your target accounts, who are taking actions you care about, visiting your site and doing things you care about. So then you can come up with the cost per engaged buyer. So the question is, how do you think about what cost per engaged buyer makes sense to you? So quite simply, the nice thing, at least, is all these engaged buyers already fit a lot of the characteristics. So you don't have the waste in terms of the low value stuff you see on the left. They end up being the right account. They end up being the right buyer personas. They have also, in a sense, expressed interest and intent because they are visiting your site. They click in on your ads, and they're showing interest in your product or solution. So the very act of taking a click action is certainly valuable to you. You don't have to wait for them to fill out a form, which is pretty awesome. So now, beyond this, they have demonstrated, this via both ad clicks, site visits, and so on, is the point we're trying to make. So where do we go from here? You'll notice that there's a number of good things that follow from here. One, they're more likely to engage with sales. So this is where we actually produce a report, certainly in our case, called a Sales Insight Report, where we give the kind of report that salespeople can then put to use to prioritize and reach out to these accounts through sales emails. So the point is, when you send out your sales cadence emails, expect to see higher, email response rates from sales. So I also expect to see more appointments and, OPIs and deals. So obviously you want to measure all of that, but the leading indicator is, am I getting even the response rate at a higher level than I need to get to? Of course, one specific action your salespeople would have to take here is to look at these reports, which are really at the account level and certain buyer activity information and personas. And, sales may need to kind of what I call source contact data, right, to these. So there isn't a form fill here, but it's certainly doable. We have a best practices guide. We have how-to guides that explain this whole thing. So that is certainly one of the key points, but the point here is simply similar to the $50 to $200. I want to close with one key point, which is you can afford to pay comparable to your high-end cost per lead, right? For each of your engaged buyers. So, Jeff, with that, go ahead.
Yeah, so for me, Monty, the reason that you can afford to spend more, specifically on a cost per engaged buyer, is that when we look at this, really we're saying, hey, first of all, we're limiting the waste, and you can figure out what that waste is by just looking at your funnel. Look at how many rejected leads you get, right? So that's the first part. The other part is, we're there even above that. How many people clicked on a link and didn't fill a form that you know nothing about? Right? So there's tons of waste there as well. So when you start to look at all this aggregated waste, you start to realize that it's almost a multiple on a cost per lead in terms of a cost per engaged buyer. And that's specifically around the ones that are filling the forms, but also the ones you're also capturing all of this added benefit of people that didn't fill a form because Quantu is providing you with the insights that you need to be able to engage those people. So oftentimes when we're thinking about a cost per lead, call it around $150, it's depending on how leaky your funnel is, it's not surprising to see a 2x, 3x multiple on the value of an engaged buyer to an organization when compared to a lead. So that's something that really stood out to me. About this, and it really is a big shift, within an organization. And the way to be able to get executive buy-in on this is doing exactly that analysis that I just discussed, which is, where is my waste? How do you eliminate waste? What is the value? What is the added value of an engaged buyer over a lead? If you can demonstrate that with data, there isn't an executive in the world that would say, that doesn't make sense, because, the writing's on the wall with the data. So yeah, thank you, Monty, for going into this.
Absolutely, Jeff. And as we wrap up, my other closing comment on for this POV is, when we talk best practices, people think of other things also within the realm of best practices. We didn't have time to get into it today. Things like, really strong segmentation of this data, having more personalized ads and creative, much more customized ads. And there are other things you can do to further increase the engagement level. But I think we hit on the key point, which is cost per lead versus cost per engaged buyer, and the idea of engaged buyers is the main thing we want to communicate here. So Jeff, I think with that, let me put up our next POV topic because that's going to be an interesting discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. So for episode 32, we're going to go beyond MQLs. We're going to talk about insights for the SDRs and BDRs. This is a topic real near and dear to my heart. I'm excited to have this conversation with you. We kind of touched on it today on how do you maximize the value of the leads that you're generating from your ABM advertising programs. And, really this is the secret sauce. So next time, Friday, February 15th, we'll be covering this topic. Thank you again, Monty.
Thank you, Jeff. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.